Yeah. Well, Christine, let's start. Welcome
Thank you.
at the podcast. We're talking about data-driven decision making today. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I'm Christina Osazuwa. Like we mentioned, I have a lot of job titles. I am the UK director for Women in Music organization She Said So. I am the founder of a music tech and data conference called Measure of Music.
Yes.
It's a conference and hackathon. And I am also the chief strategy officer for event marketing and ticketing company Shoobs.
Okay, that's a
all
lot.
about yes.
How do you manage all those jobs?
I don't have any hobbies.
So you work like 12 hours a day?
Yeah, that's why all these invitations at 11 p.m. at ADE I do not go to.
Yeah.
I really appreciate them though.
Yeah, but you also appreciate your sleep.
Yes, very much so.
Yeah, sleep is very important. James,
Nice to meet you.
Fleury, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
You're working at TicketSwap, right?
Yes.
What do you do at TicketSwap?
Yes, so I lead the brand marketing team at TicketSwap, which has grown substantially just this year, actually, since post-COVID.
Yes.
And actually, the company's growing dramatically as well. So we've gone from 70 people to over 200 in just 12 months.
Yeah.
So it's a really exciting gig to have.
But you worked in Amsterdam before, right?
Yes, yeah. I've lived in Amsterdam now for 4 years. I ran my own company called Nuveg, which is a creative agency for classical film and world music. It started and then kind of branched out into offering artist management, strategic direction to artists, to record labels, and to agents and promoters as well.
Cool.
And then finally I got kind of the bug for technology, I think you can say. Kind of fueled that curiosity that was inside me and decided that I really wanted to stay in music tech. I love what it kind of does for the industry, and how it helps advance quite an old industry generally. Like, I think the music industry is quite conservative, so to work in a music tech company is amazing. I really love the energy of it.
So you're also a multitasker, right? So
Yes.
you also have multiple jobs.
Yeah.
How do you manage both things? Because you work
just
at
a love for
TicketSwap
music.
full time,
Yeah.
and the other thing is more your free time.
No, I did it for 8 years professionally, and that was I had clients all over the world actually, and then one of my clients here was quite well known. It was a Dutch app called Primephonic. It was acquired by Apple Music last summer, and then I took the decision to come and build a team full time at TicketSwap. So new challenge for me, but yeah, incredibly exciting. And I think in terms of, I think we all probably multitask and have different roles.
Yeah. I think it's
different
a
hats.
creative music thing.
Yeah, and I think the energy of the industry just kind of takes you with you
And you know Chaz and Chris.
very well.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Too well.
Yeah. I heard you guys went out on Thursday and it got
Tuesday,
really
which was just
Tuesday.
bad. Talking about bad. Christine's making all the good life decisions.
Yeah,
and
Christine,
Chris and I make
Christine's
all the
like
poor ones.
at 11 o'clock. It's just
Variously.
I'm trying to leave at 3 a.m. James like, stay for one more.
Yeah, our
I
Kiwi
would have
friends
done.
started teaching us about Kiwi shots.
what are Kiwi
Are
shots?
you
Are
gonna
they-
name it?
They
I'm
were
not.
concoctions of different spirits that we shouldn't have been drinking
Oh,
at
yeah.
3 a.m. And
Is it like a Long Island iced tea, but in a shot?
yes,
Oh,
yes,
yeah, okay,
and
yeah.
something that you definitely shouldn't be drinking on day one of
Yeah.
ADE.
It
But
probably did involve a real live kiwi, didn't it?
At some point, I'm sure.
So, Chaz, can you pick it up and tell us a little bit more about yourself? Because you're CCO at Chartmetric.
Yeah,
It's a platform that all the big music labels use to get data insights, right?
yeah, and small labels as well. We have about 4,000 clients around the world now, plus tens of thousands of artists who use the platform as well. We basically bring in data from right across the music market and beyond, sort of to help our users understand how the marketplace is working, how consumers are finding music,
Yeah.
sharing music, talking about music with their friends, and fueling the growth of new artists and established artists for that matter. And so I've worked with Chartmetric for 6 years now, since we started with originally 2.5 people about 6 years ago. Before that, originally I was a nightclub manager. And promoted pop concerts, then moved into classical music and set up several record labels, then worked for Universal, and then became an artist manager.
What made you decide to go into the classical music?
Oh gosh, it was a long time ago. I think I was running clubs at the age of 23, 24, and I'd originally started as a promoter, which is great fun. You know, as a promoter, it's all sort of fun, it's all sort of people facing. Then I got offered the chance, I think I was 23 years old, to be the manager of a club where I promoted. And the manager had left for mysterious reasons, as is often the case. And they said, can you come and run the club? And so I thought, yeah, why not? Great, I practically live here. And
might as
so
well earn money.
But I realized then that running a club was sort of, well, promoting was all about people facing, having fun. Being the manager, no, it's all about toilets and security and dealing with the police.
It's like hosting your own birthday party.
Yeah, and it's like, oh my God, I can't do this. And I just thought, I want to do something more professional, because it's sort of like being a promoter in a club, you know, you learn an awful lot about marketing, how to promote events, how to engage audiences, and particularly at the time in the early 1990s, you know, the internet was coming along. We'd worked out that our highest paid customers, our customers with the most disposable income, they had these things called email addresses. And it's like, if we got their email addresses, we could send them promotions. We can get them to bring in even more of their highly paid friends into the club, and the bar take would grow. And at the time, people would love to give you their email address. You know, to have an email address in 1993, 94 was sort of like really cool. And so people would throw us these email addresses. We started building databases. But anyway, after realizing I was too young to run a club, I just thought, hang on a minute, I need to get some more professional experience in marketing. And I just looked around. I didn't want to leave music, and classical music just seemed a bit more professional. It seemed a little bit more organized.
And on reflection?
I think the market's evolved, you know, it's fundamentally changed. And classical music, sort of like, I haven't worked in classical music now for 10 years. And you have to remember, more people are listening to classical music today than ever before. That's the same with all genres of music. There is more music being consumed around the world. And, you know, that is an opportunity. And the people who take advantage of that opportunity tend to be the ones who are most entrepreneurial. And just, I think some genres of music, dance music in particular, is an immensely entrepreneurial space. Classical music lacks, I think, that sense of entrepreneurship at the moment.
If I think about classical music, which I personally love, I always see like really old like album covers, and that just really doesn't evolve at all. It's just still the same as like 10, 20 years ago.
I mean, one of the most curious things about moving from clubs into classical music was that the target marketplace, the target age group I was trying to reach fell. Because when I was promoting clubs, you know, we wanted to get people in who were in their late 20s or even early 30s, because they had more disposable income to spend at the bar. But when I went to work in classical music, the aim was always to get people in their early 20s, because you could sort of like hopefully shape their taste in music, you know, and just get them into one event. That was sort of like the fundamental aim.
Well, thank you for your answer. Carey,
Hi.
You're head of music, media and entertainment at Opinium. And I saw on LinkedIn that it's a company that does segmentation, journey mapping, qual and quant. And I was like, what is this?
So the usual joke is I like numbers more than the average, which is funny because average. When you have to explain them,
It's a
they're even better.
mathematical joke.
That he explained for you.
It's a niche brand of comedy.
So don't be mean. Don't. Head of music, media, entertainment for Opinium. They are a strategic insights agency, so they create qual and quant data, so mass market surveys as well as kind of small focus groups, to essentially interrupt your business, understand your fans better, understand your users, and hopefully help you make more money or a better experience, or both.
Data insight.
Data insight, and I have a spare job because, you know, who doesn't need a spare job? I'm the chief economist for the live music industry in the UK. Which involves me just kind of arguing with government and defending the value of the industry. That job was created by COVID, thanks COVID, and helped support us through that. And then also run a music conference called FastForward.
Cool. And is it an international conference?
It is if enough people visit. We've done London, Amsterdam and Sydney.
Yeah.
But post-COVID, I think we're going to just focus on London, much as I love Amsterdam.
Okay. Oh, no, noted. What is your experience in data? Did you start out in job field in data?
Yeah, so, well, not quite. Banking for 18 months, which I couldn't recommend.
Oh, really?
We
had a corporate banker yesterday who went into music as well.
Nice. He was probably better paid for his banking time than I was. So moved to PRS, so the Boomer equivalent, to be their economist. Did 3.5 years there in a team of 2 working with Will Page, who went on to be chief economist at Spotify. Smart cookie, taught me everything. I owe him a beer. Moved to EMI, built and ran big data at EMI, so 14 billion rows of Spotify and iTunes data at the time. Lucky to be on the cusp of that wave, just at the right place, right time. Then moved to Universal, as the phrase goes.
I also worked at Universal. Someone does.
It happens, right? And then ran my own company, again, continuing the theme, for about 7 years. Worked with Sony, Spotify, the O2, in a range of generally big data, but also market understanding, also consumer surveys, real range of data, all-rounder, if you will.
Right. Hey, Christine, how do you use data in your day-to-day job?
So my background's similar to Chris's in data as well. I say on my good days I'm a data scientist. And really what I always have used data in every job I've ever had is to understand audiences. My background is in marketing as well. And so I've always wanted to understand what audiences want, what audiences think, who our fans are, things like that, or how I use data. So in my current role, so I'm working, like I mentioned, a ticketing company, we get, lots of data. I always say when it comes to understanding your audience, understanding fandom, even when I was at Major Label, I always said the best way to understand that is what people are willing to spend time and money on. Yeah. And I really love the ticketing, like live music, and I love the ticketing space because I have that information, because you're inherently spending time and money with an artist when you attend their concert. And so I use data to understand who those audiences are. I use data to then basically package that up, provide that information, that insights to our organizers, which is our promoters, or provide that information to artist teams, for example, to give them a better understanding of, hey, this is who your audience is. This is what tickets they're purchasing when they're not purchasing your tickets. So, if you're an up and coming, an indie act or an underground act, and you want to know, hey, who else do my fans love? We have that insights and that information that we can provide to people, and it really gives them a more well-rounded picture, because often there's a lot of data out there, but sometimes you only have the visibility into your own data, and you don't have the visibility into everything else. So providing that additional layer of, and this is what else is out there, is kind of what I've always strived to do with any of my roles.
Do you think people want to spend their money and their time on different kinds of experiences after COVID?
Yeah. So one thing that's really nice, so I joined this company only a few months ago, and one thing that's really nice for us is that our average ticket price is actually about £20. We do a lot of like club nights, DJ nights, comedy shows, in addition to our concerts and festival tickets as well. The company, before I even joined, actually did fine, fairly fine, not perfect during COVID, because it was low cost events that could be easily shifted outside or to a tent or whatever it might be, to accommodate whatever the laws were. They weren't huge high production events often, which was quite nice. So people love the big festivals and things like that. But if you're like, oh, we're just going to do the comedy show outside, we're good. And so I think that was like what we were looking at during COVID and towards the end of COVID as well, was the idea of like agile events basically. And then now, in a post, in a whatever we are, COVID world.
Hopefully post-COVID forever.
Right. I think unfortunately we're running into a again, whatever word we're going to call the maybe recession we're running into. And so the 20 pound tickets is also still quite attractive to bring people into the door. And so that's really, really nice. And also one thing that's really cool right now, and I think the US has been doing it for a while, the UK is doing it a lot now as well, is immersive experiences. And I think that's really fun and really interesting ways to incorporate music and media and all these different things into a more immersive environments. So people love going to a concert, but there's a lot more they could be doing, and finding that promoters and organizers are doing interesting things, especially around music, is stuff that people are really clamoring and catching on to right now. I think it's a really fun and exciting and new-ish thing that's happening right now.
And James, how do you use data in your day-to-day job?
Yeah,
at
I think
TicketSwap?
actually at TicketSwap, I'm very lucky because in a tech company, there are three things that make a tech company work, and that's data, code, and people. So you need all of those three things for the company to function, and you can't work without any of those three pillars. I think for me, like I probably, because I'm working and leading a marketing team, for us, there's twofold. There's firstly how people are engaging with the product, to get reactive feedback to find out how the product should maybe change, evolve, or even stay the same.
Yeah.
And there's then looking at how the product can be shaped in the future. But I think for me as a marketeer, I guess if you could call it that, the biggest thing for me is like curiosity. So actually it's about the mindset of how you approach data. I think often people think of it as just numbers or spreadsheets. And actually that's why I tend not to use the term data anymore, because people get scared of it or they don't really understand it. Whereas actually insight is a lot sexier. Because insight can mean a lot of different things. An artist playing a concert, new music at a concert for the first time and getting a reaction from an audience, that's feedback, that's insight. An artist comparing songs that they've released pre-singles before they drop their album to find out what maybe style they should go down if they've got maybe an album that has two different styles on. Those streaming numbers and that insight for different countries, that's insight, it can be very visual and it can be very interactive. So for us, like, it's really about having a mindset and training like the people that you work with to have a mindset which is based on curiosity, because I think as a society generally we're not curious anymore. Like we're spoon-fed what gigs to go to, we're spoon-fed what meals to eat, which restaurants to go to, and
that is because of the data-driven society, right? Because of social media, the algorithm, so we get like recommendations where to go.
But I think the thing about data is that firstly there's how to collect it and how to then understand it and use it. There's also when to acknowledge it and when to be influenced by it, and there's also when to ignore it. And I think you need to have all of those strands. Like I think as long as you go into it knowing that you're curious about something, and you can use data to find out more about that thing, whatever it is, whatever conclusion you take doesn't mean that you have to follow the data. I think there is still a human kind of, how do you say it, kind of like instinct that's within all of us, that sometimes an artist will say, well look, my fans love this music, but I really know this sound actually is where I want to go as a musician, and that musician is entitled to do that, where the data is telling them something completely different. And even for us, events like easily within dance and electronic music, there are of course more popular subgenres than others, and as a company we could easily just say, well, those are the most popular, they sell the most tickets, so we're going to promote them. The world doesn't work like that. You need flavors from all different corners of the industry, and it's our job also as an independent marketplace to make sure that we can serve fans whatever their interests, and maybe even surprise them with things that they didn't even know they were going to like as well.
And eventually,
I just want to say, I wanted to add to that, one thing that I think is really interesting about curiosity is something that like we really love at Shoobs, because we do underground and indie, live underground indie music. One thing that we do is identify the people that are the tastemakers, basically the people that, I always say, like, we sold Cardi B tickets before Bodak Yellow came out. And we're like, who was the person in London that wanted to see Cardi B before Bodak Yellow came out? We went to those people. We take those people, and, I'm working on stuff right now around just like, great, let's get those people in the room. So when a new artist comes to town, those are the people that want to hear new music. Those are the people that are excited about new music. Those are people that aren't going to rely on the algorithm to tell them this is the music you should be listening to. And those are the really exciting people, because those are the tastemakers that you want to have their ear. You want to use them as your little mini A&Rs to figure out, cool, what's going to be next. And it's not just what the chart's telling you, what the algorithm, not just what the streaming data is telling you, or it's what these very cool people are also telling you, which is also a data point. And
if I may, not all data is created equal. If only 2% of people like the new song, and it's those 2%, you are set. If it's 2% and it's the wrong 2% who like it, you are stuffed. But that 2% doesn't give you an answer unless you've got it in context.
But the bulk of the data we're looking at is essentially stuff which existed long before databases, long before streaming services and social networks. 50 years ago, we were using data in the music industry, but we just didn't think of it as data. It was knowledge about the marketplace and how consumers were discovering new music, talking with their friends, sharing things. But, the scale of the market has changed. I mean, if you go back to when I was growing up in the 1990s, Okay, 1980s.
Wasn't going to do it to you.
Yeah, I used to find out about music from my friends. And my kids these days, they found out about music from their friends. They use TikTok, they use Spotify, they use YouTube. But the bulk of what they're finding out and they're encountering on those platforms is determined directly and indirectly by their friends. The difference is that, you know, when I was growing up, I had 4 friends. And they all lived on the same street as me. My kids have hundreds of friends, thousands of
online
friends. They get their influence from all different sorts of directions. And so in the old days, in the days before 2000, in the pre-digital days, you know, there wasn't much data created. And there wasn't many sources of that data. You know, you could look at radio airplay listings, you could look at the charts. You could just be in touch with the marketplace to find out what was happening. And that information which you picked up was data.
Yeah.
But it there wasn't too much data. You could sort of like absorb it and hold it in your head and use it to make really good decisions. Today, there's no way you could absorb all the data and hold it in your head. You can't even gather that much data. Never mind hold it in your head and use it to make a good decision.
Yeah.
So, you know, there's a need for tools and services and ways to aggregate this data.
That's where Chris comes in, right?
Well, yeah. 'Cause I think, thank you. Nice segue.
Good segue.
For me, like, the reality is, well, one of the risks at the moment, which is about data-powered decision making. One of the risks is that now data that can sit in a spreadsheet carries more weight than data that can't. So back to your intuitive, I understand this, I've got it, I know what it is, I'm therefore going to do that. No one arrived with a spreadsheet to challenge you in the 90s. Yeah. Whereas now it's like, well, actually, can you defend that decision? Can data back you up? And it actually risks taking the creative out of decision making, about innovation, about driving, because data can't defend you. And one of the risks with data and algorithms we could go for days on is the risk is that you are driving looking in the rearview mirror. Yep. The risk is that the data you have available to you echoes what it's seen before, same as an algorithm. You used to like this, have some more of it. No, where's the new thing? Where's the innovation? Where's the interesting? And I think the ability to take data to empower your decisions, and James rightly talks about using data to stay still, not change, or using data, looking at it going, no thanks, and then still doing what you would do. You haven't disregarded the data, but you've looked at it and gone, this is not powerful for me in this context. This is not equipping me to do the best I can do. And therefore, thank you for the consideration, but no thank you. I've got a vision, I know where I'm going.
Yeah. I will add that this idea of looking backwards also leads often to bias. Yeah. Because if you look at things, you know, if you look at, for example, music that was represented in the past, you're like, well, we know that this does really well. And is it because it did really well because only this type of music was played on the radio, and obviously it did really well because of that, et cetera, and then it's like this downhill slope of, yes, historically it does really well because of X, Y, and Z factor. You know, if you look at, there was this controversy around country music and the radio on country music, where I think some moron said that women country artists are like tomatoes in a salad, you only sprinkle a few in. Great. And so if you try to look, you know, and like, oh man, who does really well on radio and country music? Well, it would be only men, if you look at all the data, obviously, because they literally weren't putting women on the radio. Yeah. And so you have to, like Chris was saying, in terms of context is really important, and you also have to be willing to break the mold and then use other information to be able to make your decisions. It can still be data. For example, if you were looking at U.S. Census data over the last 10 years, you would see that the U.S. is going to be a majority-minority country in somewhere between 5 to 15 years, right? Bad Bunny was the biggest artist in the world in 2021, I believe. And so if you would look at the census data 5 years ago, you would probably foresee that Latin music was going to be enormous. Yeah. But if you had looked at streaming numbers 5 years ago, you would be like, time to put on a lot more hip hop, right? You know, and so you have to think about all the context and all the inputs that you're getting in order to make your decisions, not just, oh, this worked in the past and we're just going to do that.
Okay. I think also like in terms of how things have changed, like Chaz was talking about, there's now a much more stronger focus on visualization of data, because people kind of had so much of it before, they didn't know kind of how to communicate that to people. And I think the biggest example of that is, that was going to get mentioned at some point, but the Spotify Wrapped campaign is like the most kind of high profile example of how you can gamify data to fans.
I saw a meme like the other day that was saying, okay, the Spotify wrap up is probably the algorithm is checking out what kind of music you're listening to right now. So if you want like a good list at the end of the year, now is the time to switch things up to like.
I've got used to the fact that Britney's in there every year. Like, I've tried to change my listening habits, but once the aux call comes and like 9 o'clock comes in the evening and the beers are flowing, then James just turns into Britney James, and the rest is history. But I think like even internally for us. We have a strong focus on visualization, and that's something that we're still improving as a company internally, being able to take the data, because there's so much of it, and being able to show it and empower people within the company, whether that's a HR team, whether it's the engineering team, whether it's the marketing team, whether it's recruitment. I think all data can be powerful in all different forms within a company, and it's being able to communicate that to people that maybe don't understand the process of how that data is collected, but rather being able to communicate the results of it.
And do you? Oh, sorry. What do you want to say?
I was going to pick up on that and just say it's about the insight you get. There's a sort of tyranny with spreadsheets. If you give people a spreadsheet with lots of columns, lots of rows, lots of numbers on them, people get distracted by one thing. People, because it's sort of like it's one of the great faults with spreadsheets. They're incredibly useful, but they're also highly misleading because there's too much to absorb. People look at one column, and one column does not describe the marketplace, one source of data. And we often get asked, what is the most important number to look at? And the answer is there isn't one. You can't, think of consumers, nobody is a Spotify user, nobody is an Apple Music user, nobody is a YouTube user. Because everybody who uses each of these services uses other services as well. We're all on Spotify, YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook. We're all on multiple different platforms. So looking at a spreadsheet shows you verticals, but consumers aren't vertical. Consumers are horizontal. And so if you're trying to determine who is the most popular artist or who is the most significant emerging artist, you can't see it in one column of data. You have to look much broader than that, and visualizing that and providing ways for people to assess the entire marketplace. That's the real challenge going forward.
And for me, it's one of the reasons I like a survey, because I can ask you, which of these things do you do? And for once, you can see the holistic, a big picture, macro level before you dive into user level data from each of the services that will help you go deep. So you need that context first to understand. Fans of this artist are, a minority of them are using Spotify, a majority are using YouTube, so that when you get to Chaz's spreadsheet, you know which column is most important.
There's also like even new age companies that have now started up in terms on the visualization side, at least like Hotjar is something that we use quite commonly at TicketSwap. It's used a lot for products to be able to visualize where people are clicking, what they're doing actually within the app, and that's like a pretty nice way to see actually what's going on and to summarize it for people. There are also some artist management teams that are also using kind of crowd kind of control kind of microphones to test if you've got maybe a different middle eight for a song and you don't know which one you want to choose, or a different guitar solo, they can across the tour actually gauge crowd's responses. So like there's different ways of collecting kind of insight, and that's becoming much more visual, much more interactive.
And I think it's also very dependent on knowing your audience and knowing who you're speaking with.
That's one of the most important things, right? Very
important. It's like what Chaz was saying. If you hand me a spreadsheet, I'm stoked about it. I'm like, okay, let's do this. But when I was working with artists and artist management teams, I almost never showed them a single number. I would build out things like mood boards and like personas and things like that, and I'm like, cool, this is what your audience looks like. And it was an amalgamation of a lot of different data sources pieced together, and it still wasn't 100% of the whole picture, because I did not hand them the spreadsheet. But building out things that are appealing to the audience that you're talking about, I think it's incredibly important to make sure that they are able to ingest the actual information, the important things, instead of drilling down that one little column, that one number. It's like, cool, this is a more holistic picture. And so if you know who you're talking to, then you can provide that visualization in a way that works for them.
And James, can you tell us about what is the first step to create an effective or efficient data strategy?
Having an idea, I think, or having a multitude of ideas, and then deciding from all of those ideas, or even could be just like thoughts, which ones you are most curious about,
and just do it.
And it's also like in a way something that you never learn to do in its entirety, because things are always changing, new things are always coming up. And the one thing that I think is interesting is a good example in terms of brand marketing is how PR landscape has changed, I think, in the last 20 years. Before, it used to be people giving their perspectives and opinions, and it used to be like, okay, this person who's in this particular role at this company is offering their kind of insight, and it'd be very, very qualitative, but through the eyes of that one person. Now, journalists won't publish a story really without numbers. Like they want to know, like, what have you done? If you're telling a story, in our case, in some of the new markets where we've just launched this year and recently in the last couple of years, the UK being one of those, that's a slow burn for us, because we have to actually be able to tell that and communicate that story about how to buy and sell tickets safely to both promoters, venue owners, festival directors, but also to fans. And that's, PR is such a big part of that, but we need to be able to show through numbers that, hey, 1 in 3 people, for example, have experienced fraud in London, or over the age of 55, that number is 1 in 2. To be able to convince somebody that something is a problem and that you're trying to solve something and bring a solution, you need those numbers. So that's something that, in PR at least, it's changed a lot, and I think that's the biggest example, I think, in our industry.
Yeah, you agree?
Yeah, I think the other bit, so absolute curiosity, 100%. I think, so one of my favourite soundbites, data doesn't have answers unless you've got questions. So often it's easy to stare at a pile of numbers and go, yeah, I thought it was 7. It just, once you see the answer, it's really easy to think, yes, that's what I thought, or to follow it. If you're on a lead, you've got to ask a question ahead of time, and you're allowed to then be surprised by the answer. And the risk is, we talked about being fed things by data, fed by an algorithm. I think an oversupply of data without you having the chance to stop and think, but what should it be? Also carries risk. So I think creativity, curiosity, 100%, a clear view on what you're trying to achieve, and then what you think it should look like. I think would be my first few steps.
What do you think is the biggest challenge in collecting data right now?
Volume's not a problem, right? Volume's easy. Getting it into one place is your job.
Time.
Yeah, it's joining it together, working out how to effectively join data together. I mean, that's the bulk of what we do. The data, we gather a lot of data, but the data essentially already exists in lots of different places all around the world. It's figuring out how it joins together, what it actually means when it's joined together. You know, data is created when people interact. So data is essentially created by consumers. And so it's figuring out how to join it together to make meaningful sense of the marketplace. Once you understand that, then you can figure out how to effectively use it. You can use it whether you're marketing an event or marketing a record, or whether you're trying to discover new artists as well. You know, it's important to just understand what the data means.
Yeah, but do you? I was
just going to say, I think going in combines what you guys are both saying is subject matter expertise is often the hardest part about data. So I've worked at major labels and things like that, and inevitably some very brilliant people will join, and they're analysts or things like that, and their first question is going to be like, why do we always have so many more streams on Fridays? Because if you don't know that new tracks come out on Fridays, you would be very confused as to why there's always more streams on Fridays. You know, there's like all these different nuances when you're getting all this data. So like, let's say you're looking at Chartmetric, and it's like, okay, there's all this radio data. And if you're not an expert in radio, you're like, okay, cool, I'm gonna have to understand like, what do impressions mean, and like all of those different things that you have to understand about the industry, whatever industry you're in, is something that I think is lost on people when they're like, cool, I'm going to transition from one, industry to another industry. It's definitely possible, but you have to bone up on the industry to understand the audience, the dynamics, all the different things at play to actually get the work done, because context is so important when it comes to data.
For you guys, don't you find it like a challenge to communicate to people who don't maybe understand how data can be valuable, to get out of their own heads? So they kind of think, okay, the numbers are cool, but I know where I'm going and I already have an idea and I'm on this track, so don't kind of deter me from it. Because always I think the challenge that the music industry faces is kind of time, having people who understand how to use data in organisations, and then giving them the time to be able to communicate that to other people, rather than just throwing numbers at them and saying, you should listen to these, without people understanding why and how it can be important in the first place.
You still have to listen to your gut feeling sometimes, right?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, particularly when we're talking with A&R teams, record companies. I mean, their A&Rs are by nature slightly dismissive of data. And
Why is that? Why is that?
Well, there's this culture of gut instinct in A&R, being able to hear an artist, hear a track, and know it's really successful. But I would counter that and say that gut instinct depends on knowledge.
Yeah.
When I ran labels, I rarely made A&R decisions because I didn't know enough. I didn't listen to the radio enough. I didn't read enough. I didn't absorb enough information from other people. So I was sort of like not really in touch with the marketplace because I didn't have enough knowledge, enough data about the marketplace stored in my heads. My gut instinct decisions were guesses, in other words. And so A&R, and so gut instinct is the ability to make a really great decision, an well-informed decision. Be able to hear be able to hear a record, see a band on stage, and be able to interpret that and understand how you, by investing in that artist, by promoting that artist, by putting that artist together with a promoter, how you can make it even better.
Yeah, but isn't gut instinct also kind of data-driven? Because
it's subject matter expertise.
It depends on, it completely depends on knowledge, data about the marketplace.
And similarly, not all guts are equal.
It's true. That's true.
For example, if you follow data think about some of the artists that you wouldn't have David Bowie, for example, who I think for 9 years, 6 different projects, bands, solo projects, before he had kind of his first huge global break. All the data at the time would have told you if it existed and was visualized, would have told you give up.
But it would have also told you that in his early career he was probably badly promoted. He was, they followed the wrong strategy when they originally releasing his original tracks. So if you've got enough knowledge of data or just know enough about the marketplace, you can figure this out. The challenge today is there's so much information that unless you have access to that information, if somebody else has got better access than you, they may be able to make a better decision. So it's almost sort of a race. But the thing to remember is everybody talks about data-driven marketing, and data has always been important to. Sorry, data-driven A&R. Data has always been important to A&R. It always will be. But computers can't listen to music. Computers are better at making music than they are at listening to music. And computers can't tell you whether the artist is up for doing promo. They can't tell you whether the manager is a waste of space or really good. There's a certain complexity that's still in place that we cannot do predictions. You can take predictions to a certain degree. But that final step will always involve a human being.
Guys, we have to wrap it up, but I have one more question for Chris. Does data have to be difficult? Because it sounds like something really, really hard for people who are not big into maths.
So don't tell anyone I'm not very good at maths. Genuinely, most of this it's quantified intuition. It's looking at a process and going, all right, how do you discover music? What do you do afterwards? These are not complex data questions. The answer you get back sits in a spreadsheet. I think James's point on focus on insight, not data. You can get somewhere really interesting. Does it need to be scary? Absolutely not. Do you need to wrestle with it a little bit? Yeah, sorry. It's all right to go and attack it and get it wrong. It's all right to have a learning curve. I'm very rarely good at anything, let alone stuff I do for the first time. It's absolutely all right to sit alongside someone and say, what does that mean? Or I don't understand why. Or I don't understand how.
I think a lot of people are afraid to ask the question, what is it? Or I don't understand.
Yeah, and I think the way to get good at it is to have honest conversations with people who know just a bit more than you. It's pretty much how my career's unfolded. Was I always had someone smarter to go, I'm stuck, help. I think helping each other out on this stuff is probably the best way to learn it.
It's perfectly fine to not be the smartest in the room, right?
Especially when I'm sat next to Christine.
Guys, I want to thank you so much for coming and sharing all your insights on data. We have to wrap it up. I hope everybody has a great ADE. And I'll probably see you around. We can continue the conversation after the podcast's recording. And thank you, people in the audience, for listening. Are there any more questions from the audience? Oscar Griek, maybe. He's asking a question every podcast recording.
If no one else has a question,
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, yeah. Oh, we have a question. Yeah.
Thanks, that was awesome. I wrote like 10 questions down, so
Cool.
I'll pick one of them. I guess I'm just curious, when in this like surge for more and more data, how do we make sure that we respect users' privacy and,
Yeah, good question.
you know, also, yeah, just make sure we're not just going somewhere where we don't want to go with this data.
Yeah.
We don't gather personal user data, you know, and if we get personal user data, we delete it. You know, there are limits to what data can do. And to be honest, if you've got the personal user data, what are you going to do with it? Mm-hmm. You know, if one of the streaming services by mistake sent a record company 1 million email addresses of the people who'd listened to an artist's music, are you going to use that data? Because if you do, you're breaking the law.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that. You're breaking legislative rules around the world. So, and to be honest, you know, there are limits to the amount of data we can all handle. You know, and personal user data, I would say, is really not worth using. If you do have it, then you need to keep it up to date. I mean, a lot of companies, of course, build email lists, you know, or fan lists. One of the great challenges of that is you've got to keep them up to date. You know, they deteriorate very, very rapidly because people change email addresses, they change where they live, their tastes in music change. And so personal data dates, but market data is constantly evolving.
Yeah, I mean, we have PII, personal identifiable information, obviously, as we sell tickets. But the way that most data is important in aggregate, so I don't care about Sally Smith and what she bought. I care about all of the people like Sally Smith and what they all bought. And so, yes, the PII is important, but for us, it's literally important because we can just keep the email, so we know that Sally bought this, and this. Outside of that, I don't care. And so that's how we say, you know, on the right side of the law is like, you use the data you need, don't use data you don't need, and don't sell people's information and things like that.
I think the other thing in terms of consent, like you're starting a conversation with someone, right? So before and still now, like I think the frustrating thing for me is I go into an airport, I go into a restaurant, and still the way that data is collected is so shady. Like it's always through like a tick box, and it's like, hey, I'm giving you something which is free Wi-Fi, and I'm expecting something back, which is all your personal data. Whereas actually, look at most apps that you download now. The way that they have that conversation around consent at the start and the onboarding experience has completely changed. Yeah. Rather than it being a tick box, it's now like, hey, actually, we would like to keep you updated with maybe the latest gigs, for example, in your area. Would you like to hear about them? Yes or no? Yeah. So you kind of start that conversation with somebody to make sure that they are willing to go on the journey with you. Yeah. And it doesn't always mean that if you invite somebody in, so if an artist maybe launches an email list, as Chaz was talking about, you don't always have to give them a free song back. You could just say, hey, I'm launching my career. Yeah. Would you like to stay in touch about the things that I'm doing? Yeah. And you don't always have to give them, it doesn't have to be a transaction right at the start. It's a long-term relationship.
Thank you. Does that answer your question?